Welcome to another episode of Stories from the Edge of Life. We have once again a very special guest, Diane Shader Smith, who we've known from a previous interview. Diane, would you mind introducing yourself one more time to our audience?
I'm Diane Shader Smith, and I'm the mom of Mallory Smith, who passed away from cystic fibrosis. And I'm always happy to talk about what it's like to live with the grief that comes with loss and how to make the most of life when you have a chronic illness.
Thank you. And I'm Parag Bharadwaj. I'm a palliative care physician in the US. So Diane, we heard about, the journey in brief about Mallory because she had such a full life. Um, Tell us a little bit about your experience as a mother. You know, uh, when you found out she had that diagnosis, and I mean that was a long duration that you had to, be her advocate and be by her and manage her affairs. And of course, as much as you were taking care of her, what was going on in your mind as you were processing the information as a mother?
Well, you don't want to believe that the diagnosis is deadly that your child has been given. We knew that advances were taking place and that things were getting better and that the lifespan for kids had extended. It, went from 5 to 10 to 15 to 25. Now it's upwards of 40. But Mallory picked up a superbug. And so at the age of 13 or 12, it was 12, we were told by her doctor that the superbug that she had 3 possible outcomes. One was a very quick death. One was a slow decline. And the third was peaceful coexistence, which of course we hoped for. But what ended up happening was she fell into the middle category where she was colonized by B. cepacia, which was the name of the resistant bacteria, at the age of 12. And then she died when she was 25. And that was 2 months after receiving a double lung transplant.
Right. So tell us about, when you first found out, how did you deal with that news when the doctors broke it to you in terms of the diagnosis? And I'm a father. I just want you to share your sort of perspective as a mother for our audience.
Well, it was devastating, and my fear was that she would have an unhappy life. And the doctor that we saw at the time of diagnosis was amazing. And he basically said that he routinely saw patients who had been beaten by their own parents or put in hot oil spattered on them by their parents, or they were abandoned, or they ended up in foster care. And he said that when he saw Mallory, he saw that she had a loving family. And even if her life was short, it would be a happy life. And he inspired us to come up with the mantra that I followed, which was to live happy, because what he said was, nobody knows how long they get on this earth. You can step out in the street and get hit by a car. You can have a massive heart attack and die in 5 minutes. And so what you have to do is learn how to live the best life you can. And so my goal was always to make sure that every day was filled with joy, even when she was really sick. Sometimes the joy was a simple joy, like when you're in the hospital and they have shitty coffee, you go out and find a good cup of fresh brew, or you bring a friend in to visit after school so that the whole day isn't spent alone in a hospital bed. There's lots of ways to bring joy into a chronically ill patient's life. And that was my goal, to figure out every day some way to do that.
Yeah, it reminds me of something I'd heard earlier in my life, and that is, even if you don't have joy in your life, you can find it.
Yeah.
And it's an effort that you have to make. So that's what it seems like you were able to do, and you were able to find those moments of joy.
Yep, absolutely. And I still try to find them.
Great. So then, of course, over time, uh, you had many ups and downs with her. You were managing her medical condition, but then, you were trying for her to live as normal of a life. How did you do that balancing act?
Well, I was lucky because my work enabled me to work from home before the COVID and before we even knew that that was possible. I always said to my boss or my client, whatever I was doing at the time, that I had to be able to be bedside in the hospital. And so that was one way I was able to achieve balance. I didn't have to feel that pull between leaving her to go to the office and coming home. I just worked all the time. The other thing is that she needed to exercise because exercise helps dislodge mucus from the lungs. And so exercise is very important for your physical and mental health. And so I built exercise into our everyday as part of our life, as part of our activities. So that helped her physically and mentally, and it helped me mentally and physically as well too.
Yeah. So I've heard, your experience of your journey, right? Um, in other conversations we've had prior to this interview.
Yeah.
Now, there was a time when she was potentially eligible for a lung transplant, and there were a lot of issues with her insurance. And, it was just amazing to me how you just didn't give up. You went all out uh, to make sure that she had that option available to her. So, apart from the medical side, what was going through, your mind and your heart as you were trying to fight that battle?
Well, I always say that the insurance battle was the hardest non-medical challenge that we ever faced. And Mallory's perception, and she writes about in her book, Salt in My Soul, was that they were intentionally trying to run out the clock on her life, that their stall tactics were implemented so that time would pass and she would ultimately not make it to transplant. And that was really what she believed, and she documents it. And it is almost unfathomable if I were to actually go through what they did. But suffice it to say that you have to keep fighting because ultimately there are ways to get insurance companies to back down. It's just not easy and it takes a lot of fighting. I do think that doctors need to help patients who cannot advocate for themselves. There are some people who are in a position to do so, and then there are others who either have language barriers, socioeconomic barriers, time constraints, because they do have to run back and forth between their job and the patient, and then they have other children at home and they have to cook the dinner and they have to do the laundry, and they just don't have time or energy to fight the battles. And that's when I think that doctors and healthcare professionals have to step in.
Right. Um, so, in not to minimize your personality, but you were sort of like a fighter, right? You fought for her, right? Were you always like this, or is it the mother in you that brought out that
No, I
aspect of?
think I didn't have to fight any battles before this. It developed over time because in the early days there weren't that many issues, but as things became more complicated and issues came up and everything seemed more desperate because her clock was ticking on her lungs and her lung function. And it's just something that you do when you're in that situation. You have no choice.
Got it. Any words of wisdom for other mothers in your situation?
Yes, seek out help. And if you're not sure how to access information on the internet or you don't have the capability, ask your medical team, ask your doctors, ask the nurse practitioners, ask the social workers. Look for special patient services within hospitals. They have, I don't think it's called customer relations. I don't know what it's called. There's a name for it. Patient advocates. There are ways to get help. And I advise anybody who feels that they're in over their head or they can't do it on their own to seek out help, because there are people and organizations that will do that.
Right. So over the years, you must have gone through so many emotions. Can you describe some of them?
I think the spectrum from great joy when Mallory would score a winning goal in water polo or spike the ball down the competitor's, sideline in a volleyball match in high school or at college when she played club, to fear when things came up that we didn't know how to deal with, to utter despondency when you realize there's no more options. And then every emotion in between, because it's a full life lived compressed into 25 years. And when there's no pain and there's no doctor's appointment and no blood, and you're just literally watching a movie, you feel joy that other people don't necessarily feel because they don't really realize how lucky they are just to be alive. Mallory used to say, you know, I'm lucky to be alive on days that she felt okay. And, you know, a lot of people, and this is a really important thing to remember, a lot of people looked at Mallory as the golden girl who had it all because she was beautiful and she was smart and she had active parents and she had access, but she would have traded everything for the chance to take a breath that didn't hurt and also to have a life that wasn't defined by illness, because those were two issues that she spoke about and wrote about. And I know from living with her that, you know, she just would have loved the chance to be a regular kid.
All right. And how has life been for you after her death?
Well, you know what they say, with privilege comes responsibility. And what I do know is that there's a lot of people who don't know how to navigate, who don't have the same access that we had. And what gives me comfort is to think that she didn't die in vain, and that her words that she spent 10 years writing, that her story that she lived, the experiences that I had, that Mark had, that we can use those to help other people. And because there's a book, which is actually right here, I'll show you. I keep it by me at all times. Um, because there's a book, because there's a documentary, because I give talks all over the place, there's ways to share the information, and that is a healing thing. You know, they talk about the 5 stages of grief, which I really do believe are true. And then there's a 6th stage, which is finding meaning. And when you find meaning, I think it helps you go forward. I have a group of friends who've lost children that I've become very close to, and those of us who are doing advocacy work that we feel is helping others are emotionally in a better place than the ones who are just drowning in their grief and they haven't been able to channel it anywhere. I think you do have to take your grief and channel it so that you don't wallow, because it's really easy to wallow. Every single day I miss Mallory. I mean, it's going to be 5 years in November, and there's not a day that goes by that I don't think, how is it possible that she's not here? And how am I moving forward and living my life? And a lot of people tell me to stop and think about everything I'm doing in her memory that's helping others, but that's not what I do. What I do is I try to figure out what I can do, and the doing is what actually helps me move forward.
Right. So I don't like to make assumptions. What is the purpose of your life that you've inferred to be
You
moving
mean since
forward?
Mallory passed away?
Yeah.
So we have a global health crisis of antimicrobial resistance, which people know as superbugs, and the acronym is AMR. And Mallory received phage therapy as an experimental treatment, and it's being used in Australia and Belgium and England. And we've seen a few cases here in the United States. Mallory was the first patient with cystic fibrosis to receive phage therapy, and I feel a responsibility to share information about the treatment. The insights that she gleaned and wrote about, I share with medical schools, hospitals, grand rounds, but I also speak to lay audiences. Last night, I spoke to a group called Femtech, which is young women who are doing female healthcare technology companies. And they were incredibly moved and motivated to work harder to bring these services and companies to people's lives, because there is a lot of suffering in the world right now. We're not in a very happy place. So if you can do something to actually improve a life, you're going to feel better. I don't care who you are or what has brought you to that point, but it does help.
So you said that you feel it's your responsibility. Why do you feel it's your responsibility?
Because we were given opportunities that other people don't have. And I feel like I want to share the lessons that I've learned. I want to take the material that Mallory wrote over 10 years and share that, because it would be a crime, in my opinion, it would be a wasted life to not take everything that she documented and share it as widely as possible. And every single time I speak, I get the feedback that it's helpful and that there are important insights there.
Right.
The other thing I say is that 67 hospitalizations turns you into an accidental expert about the ways patient care can and should be improved. And I do think that I know from, again, talking to other parents who've lost children, that we have a sort of a skill set and an understanding that doesn't come from going to medical school, and it doesn't come from reading books. It comes from lived experience, and lived experience teaches you different things than you do read about in school. So it's, but I am actually going to be going back to school in the fall. I'm going to be doing a narrative medicine certification program at Columbia, because I joke that what I'm doing is driving without a license, meaning that I am practicing narrative medicine in terms of my understanding of what it is, with no formal training. So I figure it's, after doing this for 4 years, it's time to actually get professionally trained and certified so that I have, I know that I'm doing the best job I can.
Wow, that's amazing. Now, I will tell you, when I heard about your experience, with Mallory, I heard a lot of different things, the things that she went through, and how you were there. And I shared this with you. Like, in the end, my conclusion was, all I heard was this was the story of how much a mother loves her daughter.
Then and now it continues.
Yes.
It doesn't go away.
And that's why I said loves. I did
Yeah.
in the present. Uh, so thank you for sharing that with us. It's not easy for folks to be so open and candid about their experiences. Now, if I were to ask you to share, the wisdoms that you've picked up, through your experience, that others could benefit from, I would like to welcome those words.
You mean now?
Yeah.
Well, the main thing is to educate yourself about whatever it is that's causing the problem. If it's a disease, if it's a treatment, if it's a mental health problem, there are a lot of comorbidities. When people experience illness, they oftentimes have ancillary symptoms and problems. And I think it's really important to pay attention to your mental health and the mental health of your loved ones, along with your physical health. So it's the combination of paying attention to those two. Ask questions, read as much as you can. And if you are not able to understand, ask for help, because there is help out there. That's what palliative care is about,
Right.
making the patient more comfortable. And the truth is that people think that palliative care is for dying patients, but it is so much more than that. And as a palliative care doctor, you probably have a lot to say about that, but that has been my experience and understanding, that people misunderstand what it is, don't realize it's support that they can ask for, and that it's readily available in many places.
You're right. You bring back memories. I did get called to take care of a few. I should have been called to take care of more cystic fibrosis patients and patients who've gone through lung transplants.
Yeah,
Uh,
every patient that has a chronic illness
you're
should
right.
be offered palliative care. That's something I advocate for, and that's something Mallory advocates for in the book.
Thank you. Thank you. Uh, any pearls of wisdom from you?
Well,
You
all I
mentioned
say is,
the medical side, but
if you
about
think I
life?
have anything to say that's interesting, then you should read Mallory's book, because everything I know from her, and she took 10 years to document it. And there is a website, saltinmysoulbook.com and saltinmysouldoc.com. And they connect back and forth to each other, but they have all kinds of stuff on there where I speak, the press that's written about it. You can see pictures of Mallory. And if you want to watch the trailer or you want to read an excerpt of the book, it's a great resource.
It's very interesting. You said that all that you know is from her. Usually, it's the kids who learn from their
Yeah.
mothers,
No.
right?
Well, the information is out there, and if you pay attention, and Mallory was wise beyond her years and did a lot of reading and a lot of studying, and I watched her, and she navigated her chronic illness with grace and with intelligence. And again, she was lucky. She had access, and she had privilege. And so that's why there are lessons that she imparts that I think are important to read and to study.
All right. So I'll again request our audience to access her book and the documentary and also the website.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Diane.
Thank you.
Hope to have you again at some point in time and check on you. And thanks for sharing your story with us.
Thank you.
All right.
Did you like this story? If so, please subscribe to this channel and like and share the video. Want more? Buy the book, Stories from the Edge of Life, available now on Amazon for more stories like this. All proceeds support Palliative Care Network, a nonprofit dedicated to alleviating suffering and improving the quality of life for patients facing end-of-life issues. Consider extending your contribution by donating through the link below. Thank you for your support.